Hello, hello, and welcome again to the David Messiah YouTube channel, where our watchwords are to teach and to build back up the kingdom of Zion. And my name is Sidney Thomas, the founder and the moderator. The title of this presentation is Urim and Thummim, the biblical use of Ephod and the Yoruba practice of Ifa. Urim and Thummim, the biblical use of Ephod and the Yoruba practice of Ifa. And this subject arose very briefly in my previous upload on why it is the so-called Jewish Messiah is not the David Messiah, wherein I was moved to speak of the use of Urim and Thummim in some of the conclusions and assertions that I indeed was making in that upload. And I promised in the description to say a little bit more about Urim and Thummim, and actually now in addition to tie it in with the biblical use of Ephod and the Yoruba practice of Ifa. And so let me first of all go uh, to scripture where Urim and Thummim is referenced, albeit briefly in terms of its use, in the book of Ezra, chapter 2, verse 63. And so let me bring it up, because I did refer to that verse. Yeah, here it is. Here it is. So, verse 63. And the Tirshata said unto them that they should not eat of the most holy things till there stood up a priest with Urim and with Thummim. And so the idea of that being simply that in this matter that was in some dispute as to the Barzillai family that could not prove themselves to be priests using the genealogical records, that for the time being the Tirshata would not let them eat of the holy things, but that the matter could be decided dispositively once there stood up a priest with Urim and with Thummim. And so I made a point that I have been given that gift of Urim and Thummim, and therefore I am a priest with Urim and Thummim. And so the first point I wish to address in that regard is that no, I am not a priest of Levi, because I do not come from the line of Levi, neither am I a priest in the Aaronic order, because I do not come from the loins of Aaron. But I have been made a priest, nevertheless, after the order of Melchizedek. Melchizedek. And this was the same priesthood order to which Moses belonged. And so the priesthood order of Melchizedek is higher than the priesthood order of Aaron, because Moses, after all, was the one that ordained Aaron and his priestly order flowing from him. So therefore he had to be a priest of at least equal order, and indeed also perhaps of higher order, if he could have been the one to ordain Aaron. And that we also gather, and it is confirmed when you read the sealed book of Moses. Because in the sealed book of Moses, we get all kinds of further information as to why indeed it was that the book had to be sealed, because the children of Israel at that point were not able, so to say, to receive that higher teaching associated with the priesthood order of Melchizedek. Because this is the same, it could be also called the priesthood order of Yeshua, the priesthood order of the Son, because that is what it is. And that is why, indeed, we see, if you go to the book of Revelation, chapter 2, verses 26 and 27, we see where it is that it falls to the Son, Yeshua. In the heavenlies, he is EAL, and is the first among many archangels and so forth. After him comes Michael. Michael was number 2 in that order. Number 3 in that order was the one now called Lucifer, Hillel in the Hebrew. And after them were Gabriel and Phanuel and Raphael and so forth. Number 10 was Samael. So 1/3 of those actually under the leadership of Hillel fomented and carried out rebellion in the heavens. And a lot of what is taking place on the earth has to do with making this free will choice whether to join Lucifer in that rebellion or to find life eternal with the Father, under which it is necessary to obey his righteous law. And so a whole lot of the drama that's unfolding on the earth, it pertains essentially to that drama. But anyway, the point though is this, that to those who might raise the objection, well, if you're not of the line of Levi, then you cannot be a priest with Urim and Thummim. Well, the answer to that is no. And to get clear further sort of, teaching as to that, just read the sealed book of Moses. But I know I have been given Urim and Thummim. It's not a question. And I know that I have been appointed a priest after that priestly order of Melchizedek. The reader, of course, or rather the listener, may, of course, hear or forbear. That is certainly their right. Okay, but I also, in the process, had mentioned that I had been a priest of Ifa in the Yoruba tradition, and also a priest of Shango in that same tradition. And it was in 2009 that I had a sort of a a crisis of identity, because at the time I did not know that the Yoruba people, nor myself, that they and I were essentially of the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But I had been listening to some of the Hebrew Israelite preachers over YouTube, and that indeed was what they were preaching. And so as a priest of Ifa, I could go to Ifa and pose that question and reliably get an answer. I know that too, because as a priest of Ifa, you go to spirit to find answers to questions. When one is having whatever sort of difficulty in life, one or one's clients, because one's clients would come to one to do that sort of thing as well. And it would be a very remarkable thing that the way Ifa practice is carried out, if a client comes to you, even before the client tells you what problem it is he has, what you do is you take the matter to Ifa, as it is called, and Ifa will give you that reading that says, first of all, what the problem is, before they tell you the problem, and also what kind of, what would need to be done to give relief to the client. And it sort of is reminiscent of the problem that Babylon had there in sorry, not Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar had there in Babylon, where he'd had that dream that was very disquieting, and he wanted his wise men to to tell him, first of all, what dream it was he had, and then give the interpretation. And none of the wise men could do it except for Daniel. And Daniel put the question to Spirit in a simple prayer to the Most High. And then when he went to bed that night, the very same disquieting dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had was shown to Daniel, and as well the interpretation of it was shown to Daniel. So demonstrating in a sense the awesome power of the Most High, which is that faculty at the least of omniscience. Number two was a faculty on the tree of life, by the way, but that's another subject. Let me not get into that. So Ifa practice would be carried out in much the same way. And it is by the name Ifa, it is reminiscent of so many occurrences in scripture where what was called the Ephod was used as a device of divination. And here's an example right here. 1 Samuel chapter 23 verse 9, and David knew that Saul secretly practiced mischief against him, and he said to Abiathar the priest, bring hither the ephod. Bring hither the ephod. And if we go into that story, you will see where then said David, so now David is using the ephod. O Yahweh, God of Israel, thy servant, hath certainly heard that Saul seeketh to come to Keilah to destroy the city for my sake. And now he has a question that he poses in effect to the Most High, in a sense through the ephod. Verse 11, will the men of Keilah deliver me up into his hand? That was one question. Second question, will Saul come down as thy servant hath heard? Second question. And then, O Yahweh, Eloah of Yesharelo, I beseech thee, tell thy servant. And then it goes on, and Yahweh said he will come down. Then continuing, then said David, will the men of Keilah deliver me and my men into the hand of Saul? And Yahweh said, they will deliver thee up. Then David and his men which were about, so now David knows the situation, because he's used ephod as a device of divination to find out through spirit what is going on. Now I'm not interested in this particular. Let's carry on because it's interesting. Then David and his men, which were about 600, arose and departed out of Keilah because he couldn't trust them to keep him safe, and went whithersoever they could go. And it was told Saul that David was escaped, and he forbore to go forth. So David escaped. Okay. So this is exactly what goes on when you are a priest of Ifa. Someone comes with some concern, some question, some problem in their life, and you inquire of spirit using the device of what is called Ifa. Okay, and Ifa is clearly related, certainly, just from the sound of the word Ifa as opposed to ephod. Ifa, you could see straight away, derives from that paleo-Hebrew word that is rendered in the English as ephod. And in the full expression for Ifa, it is Ifa Odu, because one uses the Ifa to obtain the Odu. The Odu is that sign, that verse that describes a situation that the client finds himself in. And by the way, again, without the client even having to say what his issue is. Okay, so in the abstract, it is a sort of a mechanism for the casting of lots. Because when you use the Ifa Odu, there are at least two different devices, but the same kind of question could be posed. The same scope of answering possibilities is there in either case. It is a sort of a binary based system, but a binary based system that is sort of extensive enough in the range of possible answers that to any one question, the range of answers is up to about 3,000 plus. I forget what the exact number is. But it is a combinatorial problem that one can work it out. So one method is called the opele. You sort of cast a chain and you ask the question and you cast a chain. And depending upon, all the possible answers that there could be, is the answer that is relevant to the situation that being inquired about. And then there's another method which involves, pounding the palm kernel, so to say, in one's palm and trying to grab all of them at the same time. And depending upon, whether it is one left, two left, and none left, you can kind of modulate the answer. So it's a repeated series of doing that, which adds up in effect to what you would do at one go using the opele. But that one is also considered more definitive for various other reasons, because you have to kind of bring your heart and your soul into it, in a sense. You can't just come cold and blind and bam, and they don't even, spirit doesn't even know exactly what is the question you're even asking. So give them a chance to wake up, sort of thing. Um, so that is what is done implicitly using the Ephod Odu. You understand? Or rather, it's called the Ephod in scripture, but as I said, in the Yoruba, it is the Ifa Odu. Well, Urim and Thummim is along the same line, but Urim and Thummim are a sort of a simplified version of that. Urim and Thummim, as if you go to my book, The Appointed Time, the Tarrying and His Faith, there in chapter 16. I was given to Urim and Thummim and how it could be used. It's just a pair of dice. One dice is distinguished from the other one. So typically, the dice that is called Urim, which means light. Ur means light. So that one typically would be, say, a green dice. The other one, let's say, would be a red dice and would be called Thummim. And Thummim carries, so the green one is the one that is answering yes to whatever question that you're posing, and the red one is answering no. But each may give a range of answers. So because the pair of dice, the range can be from 1 to 6 in terms of the number of what you call it, what appears on the face of the dice when you throw it. So it is somewhat arbitrary whether 6 is the highest or 1 is the highest in terms of the outcome on the dice. And how I was guided to use it, 1 is the highest answer. or the answer with the strongest degree um, to whatever the question posed. So if you get an answer where the green dice is showing a 1 and the red dice is showing a 6, well, that's the strongest possible answer of a yes that you could get in that system. And the combinatorics of it would let you know that there are only 36 possible answers to any question you may pose, as compared with over 3,000 for Ifa Urdu. So in some ways, there's less that you may do with Urim and Thummim, but at the same time, it doesn't matter, because with Urim and Thummim, you have supporting it the entirety of Scripture. So you can get an answer, you can look for an answer to a question by asking to be guided to that verse in Scripture that most corresponds to what it is that is being faced in terms of the problem brought by the client. So you have all of the verses of the Psalms, you have all of the verses of Proverbs, you have all of the verses of the prophets. So with every verse of Scripture, there is a kind of a sort of an enveloping sort of, if you like, structure, combination of things and forces that pertain to that particular verse. Sometimes all you want is a yes, no, so you don't need to go into all of that. But if you want to get a nuanced kind of an answer to any question you might have, even though it's only 36 possible responses, you can tease out a complete understanding by using the entirety of Scripture to do so. Okay, all right. So that because perhaps, and I'm here, this is a speculation, because this was my plea to the Most High when He told me that I would have to completely give up all that Yoruba practice, that indeed I would have to burn all of my paraphernalia, etc. Okay, including a gold pen that I highly treasured that I inherited from my father. Okay, the rest of it, neither here nor there, drums and all kinds of stuff, fabric and etc. and etc. and etc. But somehow that gold pen, hit me hard. I didn't, I didn't want to give that up. But he said everything was going into the fire, which it did. But because I made that plea, what shall I have now to give me guidance from Spirit when I need guidance? And so he gave me Urim and Thummim. And at some later point, he also let me to know that I was indeed appointed to the priesthood of Melchizedek. Okay, and Yeshua became a part of my life. But as the intercessor, I came to understand his cosmological role very clearly. So I came to understand that Yeshua was never the David Messiah. He is and always was the intercessor. Because when mankind fell, as long as we're in a state of disobedience, basically we have the only way to get through to the Most High is through an intercessor. He wouldn't have it any other way. And in part it is for our own sort of protection because the story of the sons of Aaron is instructive in that regard. When they went into the Holy of Holies waving strange incense, they were burnt up to a crisp. So the simple sort of understanding to derive from that is you cannot, in a sinful state, approach the Most High. It is very simple. People want to make it complicated. People want to argue as though it is a point to argue. You do not argue. You do not set up an argument to try to counter a fact. You understand? Anyway, that's going off into a whole other direction. My point is that the three things are related: Urim and Thummim, what is called the Ephod in Scripture, and what is called Ifa in the Yoruba tradition. And what comes out of Ifa inquiry are Odu. So it is Ifa Odu, which is straight up, you know, a vocalization very similar to what is called Ephod in Scripture, and with essentially the same meaning. But what does Odu mean? Odu is just a single consonant. It is Dal, depicted pictographically in the paleo-Hebrew by a door, by a veil, by a pair of lips, which also sort of marks the idea of a separation between an outside and an inside. Okay, so the Odu is what is beyond the veil. You understand? Beyond that veil, separating this world from the world of spirit. Right? So this is the point of doing an inquiry, is to get beyond the veil to see what spirit says about some situation that is under investigation. And then the Ifa part of it, the Ephod part of it, that PH consonant pertains essentially to the mouth. Okay? So Ephod is carrying the idea of um, speaking the oracle, speaking that word from spirit that is beyond that veil that is depicted by that letter Dal, which is pictographically shown as a veil or a door, as a pair of lips. So that's all that is. Okay. So that's the point I want to make, and to draw from that point that the Yoruba people, having inherited all of this, when I initiated to Ifa, one of the things that took place, which I later came to understand because I later came to read um, Torah, the book of Exodus, where in fact, was described the initiation ceremony that Aaron and his sons were obliged to undergo, and the sacrifices that were made, the cleansing things that were done, and etc. And from the detail that is given there in Torah as to that ritual, I realized that when I initiated to Ephod, they were doing much of the same things. The blood sort of sprinkling on the garment, the blood from the animal, sacrificial animal, a little on the toe, a little bit on the, and I forget all of it now. But it was a very similar thing. So there is a connection that goes deep to an ancestral tradition that clearly was inherited now from our forefathers, the children of Israel. It goes back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's where that comes from, which also cements the idea and the conclusion, and we don't even need this particular finding to cement it, the idea that the Israelite people are the Negro people. Not the black people amorphously, because many black people who are not Negro in that sense, who are not of the tribe of Abram, Isaac, Jacob, and in particular Judah. Many black people are not. And when I say black people, I mean dark of skin and even woolly of hair, who are not Negro in that sense. Nor are we sort of African in any way other than an incidental way, because Africa is a landmass. Nobody inherits their identity from a landmass. People want to think that is so, but your identity comes with the blood that you carry, not with the landmass where you are happening to have a sojourn or where some of your ancestors happen to have a sojourn. So many of our brethren, so to say, of the blood, did not come out of Africa. When I say we were there in Africa, in that land called Egypt, where we were enslaved, but after we went up out of Egypt into the inheritance land of Israel, some of us from the northern tribes, from there, they went to all kinds of places. For example, the people there in Fiji, they didn't go back down into Africa and in some sense become African before they made their way over the seas to where is now Fiji. But I've been guided through Urim that the people of Fiji, our brethren with the dark skin and the woolly hair, are in fact of the tribe of Reuben. But to say that they're African is a complete misnomer, because neither in fact have they come out of Africa, okay, nor is it the case that is somehow their essential identity. And that has been a sort of a casual mistake taken for granted. What's his name? Runoko Rashidi. And I very much, value and appreciate the work he's done otherwise. But he kept on making the statement in the titles of his works, the African presence here, African presence in India, African presence in the South Pacific, African presence. That is a presumption. And by the way, never examined. And that is the nature of brainwashing. If you take something to be true to the extent that you do not need to examine it further, then, that is what is called brainwashing, because you never examine it. And it doesn't take much examination to understand that at best, a landmass, since it cannot confer bloodline identity, can only incidentally, not fundamentally, only incidentally be a correlate of one's identity. And we need to stop thinking like that, because if you keep on thinking like that, you will, and indeed, this is one of the things the Scripture says about the David Messiah, that he will not allow himself. Although I certainly do still sometimes make the mistake of taking things as given and don't examine them, because it gets tedious to peek under every little premise that you might be even unconsciously assuming. But the David Messiah is supposed to go beyond the surface and go to the fundamental always of a matter, rather than getting caught up in incidentals that can lead you far astray. And I confess to having made that mistake on many an occasion. And that's one of the weaknesses of Urim and Thummim. When you pose a question to spirit, sometimes embedded in the question is an unexamined assumption. And if you haven't examined the assumption, but it is a premise of the question, and that premise in fact is wrong, then now the spirit tries to wisen you up, but it doesn't always succeed. It may take years sometimes to undo something that is assumed but is not true. And I give one example because of how I came into the Hebrew Israelite understanding. I took it as a given that the fellow knew what he was talking about. So I took the 12 tribes chart as a given. And under the 12 tribes chart, I was a Benjamite because I'm down there in the West Indies. It's only later that I came to understand that no, I am not a Benjamite. Not that they're not Benjamites in the Caribbean now, but as for me personally, no, I'm not a Benjamite. I'm from the tribe of Judah of the house of David. And by the way, the same applies to the people of Haiti, of Haiti. 12 tribes chart says that they're Levites. Well, okay, a lot of them that are. But I well remember asking that question as to Toussaint Louverture, and getting the answer that he was not of the tribe of Levi. In fact, he was of the tribe of Benjamin. So, broad brush sort of assumptions can sometimes lead you badly astray. But later on, you have to peel back and find out, well, okay, I made a mistake somewhere along the line. And for me, it helps because I have a mathematical background. So I know the discipline of going to your starting assumptions and fixing those assumptions if something is not working itself out at the other end. Okay, so that really is all I want to say as to that. I am a priest with Urim and Thummim, but I am not a priest of Levi. I'm a priest in the order of Melchizedek. I'm a priest in the priesthood of the Son of God. That's what I am. But he is my intercessor. In fact, he is my deliverer. He is the one that is raising me up here now. But he cannot put any glory unto himself. All what he does must be in the name and to the great glory of the Most High. You understand? But anyway, that's going off into another topic. So I will stop there and give all praise, all glory, all thanks, all exaltation to the Most High God, Yahweh, and to those of you still listening. I say, Shalom.